Welcome to SustaiNews, where we bring you renewable energy and sustainability news. Today we're joined by a guest who's been working in the development and renewable energy sector for many years. Our guest is Adam White. He's the Secretary General at REX International, a non-profit organization that promotes an open, pan-European renewable energy market. Welcome to SustaiNews, Sir White. Thank you for being with us today.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Can you please introduce yourself and your role at REX International?
So I'm Adam White. I'm Secretary General at REX International, which is an industry association representing the users of guarantees of origin, which are the certificates needed to prove the consumption of renewable energy. We represent the producers, traders and consumers of these certificates.
All right, thank you. Now, can you tell us what are generic trends in the field of guarantees of origin globally?
Yeah, so I think the kind of clearest trend overall is the increasing use of, increasing consumption of renewable energy as proven by energy attribute certificates, of which guarantees of origin are one. So we see in each of the markets in North America, in the geo market, mostly in Europe, and in the IREG market, which is spread across a few countries around the world, there's consistently been growth year on year in all of those markets. That's the kind of the big overarching trend, which shows us that more and more consumers are choosing renewable energy, which is obviously a great thing. And then within that kind of overall trend, we see progress being made at both ends of the market. So we see at the kind of the beginning of the market, the first step that consumers make, there are more and more consumers coming into the market and choosing to buy renewable energy. And they might be doing that in a relatively simple way initially, but then we often see them moving kind of through the steps of the market towards choosing more and more specific types of renewable energy and more sophisticated ways of buying renewable energy, like PPAs, for example, which I think we'll touch on later, but also innovations like 24/7 matching, trying to understand the CO2 value of their renewable energy consumption and so on. So we see this kind of overall increase, and then both at both ends of the market we see important progress being made.
Okay, thank you. So what is the international demand for virtual PPAs?
Yeah, so we're not a market player in our own right at REX International, so I'm not fully qualified to talk about specific product groups like virtual PPAs, but I can speak overall to say that PPAs are obviously an increasingly important way for particularly corporate consumers to buy renewable energy, and there are many different ways of doing it, from physical, sleeved, virtual and so on, and really, even though they have these kind of product categories, each PPA is individual because it's a relatively long-term agreement for power and renewables. It's usually a bundled contract, but it can also be an unbundled contract just for power or just for certificates. But we see PPAs as an important way of really the larger corporate consumers supporting the energy transition by providing this long-term vision of sales for renewable energy producers. And we see that kind of demand increasing all the time. We see, as I mentioned before, often consumers coming in at the kind of the easiest end of the market to buy renewables. They might be working through a trader or a broker to identify particular certificates to cover their consumption. But then as they move through towards these PPA products, which are more sophisticated, require more kind of investment to secure, we see that is becoming more and more in demand. And so with organisations like Resource here in Brussels, where I'm based as well, supporting that kind of consumption, it's an important part of the market, and increasingly so.
All right, thank you. We arrived to our last question. What kind of projects and product innovation is REX International involved in?
Yeah, so we're involved a bit like the market development. We try and support both ends of the market. So we're there to educate consumers who aren't currently deliberately buying renewable energy and giving them the tools and the understanding they need to do so. And also we're working at the kind of the innovative end of the market as well. So we participate in the Energy Tag Initiative and the Euroelectric 24/7 Task Force Initiative, both of which are publishing papers now on increasing the granularity of guarantees of origin and other energy attribute certificates so that they can be matched both in time and hopefully have some more granularity in terms of CO2 information on the guarantee of origin. So that's kind of one area in which we're focused. We also are supporting the development of the European Standard on Guarantees of Origin. So this was stipulated in the last Renewable Energy Directive here in Europe that member states had to comply with the standard. And so that standard had to be updated to match the latest law and to the latest developments in the market. And so we're part of that process in updating the SEN standard. And then also we look at kind of the latest developments in the market, and we can see initiatives around, for example, developing an exchange for guarantees of origin. That's something that we keep a close eye on. And then as Europe's obviously relatively harmonized as a market, but there are some diversities in different countries, either in the core EU 27 or in the EEA countries, EFTA countries, or periphery countries like the UK. So we look into developments, for example, in Norway, where the government has some resistance to the use of guarantees of origin, and then into the UK and Switzerland, for example, where they're working to try and achieve mutual recognition with the European EU GEO scheme. So those are the kind of the initiatives that we try to stay abreast of across the market.